The darkness between galaxies held no mercy. Fleet Commander Zixthala stood before the massive viewing screen of his flagship, watching another world burn. Orange flames danced across the planet's surface as his biomechanical ships finished their work. In 6 hours, nothing would remain alive on what the local species had called their homeworld. Status report, Zixthala commanded, his 4 arms crossed behind his back. The biomechanical implants covering half his face glowed softly in the dim light of the command chamber. Sector 7 Alpha is now clear, Commander, reported his tactical officer. All 7 species have been eliminated. Genetic samples have been collected for analysis. Useful technology has been catalogued. Zixthala nodded. Another galaxy cleansed. Another step toward the perfect order that the Kethmori Empire demanded. For 200 years, their great purge had swept across the universe, removing the chaos that inferior species brought to existence. World after world fell before their overwhelming power. The Kethmori viewed themselves as the universe's immune system. Wherever they found life that lived in disorder, that fought wars, that wasted resources on foolish concepts like art and emotion, they acted. Their massive fleets moved like surgical instruments, cutting away the infection of random evolution. Bring up the star charts, Zixthala ordered. The viewing screen shifted to show a 3-dimensional map of nearby galaxies. Red markers indicated worlds that had been purified. Green markers showed targets yet to be cleansed. One small spiral galaxy caught his attention. What is the status of this system? He asked, pointing to the green marker. Designation, Milky Way Galaxy, his navigator responded. Initial scans show multiple species across several hundred star systems. Technology levels vary from primitive to early space travel. Estimated cleansing time, 15 standard cycles. Zixthala studied the data flowing across his screen. The galaxy appeared unremarkable. Dozens of species scattered across its spiral arms, most still bound to their home planets. A few had achieved basic interstellar travel, but nothing that would pose any real challenge to Kethmori forces. Interesting, he murmured. Several species show signs of rapid technological advancement. This one here. He highlighted a cluster of systems near the galaxy's outer rim. They call themselves humans. Recent expansion into surrounding systems. Military vessels detected. His tactical officer leaned forward. Shall we request additional fleet support, Commander? Unnecessary, Zixthala replied. 3 Devastator-class vessels should be sufficient for the entire galaxy. Contact Fleet Admiral Mordek. Inform him that the Helix Galaxy has been successfully purified and that we are ready to proceed to our next target. Within hours, the response came through quantum communication. Fleet Admiral Mordek himself would lead the assault on the Milky Way. His massive fleet, consisting of 3 world ships each over 50 kilometers long, would make short work of any resistance. Zixthala felt satisfaction as he watched his own fleet begin the journey toward their new target. The biomechanical ships moved through space like living creatures, their hulls pulsing with organic energy systems. Each vessel was a work of art, combining the best technology from hundreds of conquered civilizations. The Kethmori had achieved perfection through conquest. Every useful gene, every innovative technology, every efficient design concept from their victims became part of their growing strength. They were no longer a single species, but a collective representation of everything valuable in the universe, purified of the chaos and disorder that had created it. As his fleet entered hyperspace, Zixthala reviewed files on the upcoming targets. The humans appeared to be one of the more advanced species in the galaxy, having achieved faster-than-light travel and established colonies across multiple systems. Their military showed signs of organization and discipline, but discipline meant nothing against overwhelming power. The Kethmori had faced organized resistance before. The Thexmori Empire had ruled over 40 systems and possessed weapons that could crack planets. The Velthari Federation had united 12 species in a desperate alliance. The machine intelligence of the synthetic collective had built fleets that darkened entire solar systems. All had fallen. All had been cleansed. The humans would be no different. Their small ships and primitive weapons would be swept aside like dust before a storm. Their colonies would burn, their homeworld would be sterilized, and whatever useful knowledge they possessed would be added to the Kethmori collective. Fleet Admiral Mordek's flagship, the Absolute Judgment, led the formation as they approached the outer edge of the Milky Way. Long-range sensors began cataloging targets and analyzing defensive capabilities. The readings confirmed their expectations. Scattered military forces, no unified command structure, technology that lagged centuries behind Kethmori standards. Deploy advanced scouts, Mordek ordered. Begin standard purification protocols. We will start with the outer colonies and work inward toward their core systems. Leave their homeworld for last so they can witness the futility of resistance. The 3 massive world ships dropped out of hyperspace at the Galaxy's rim. Each vessel dwarfed entire planets, their biomechanical hulls bristling with weapons that could glass continents. Smaller ships, each the size of city districts, swarmed around them like protective insects. Mordek studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. No sign of organized resistance. No massive defensive fleets rushing to meet them. Just the expected chaos of a primitive civilization that had not yet learned to submit to proper order. Then his sensor officer spoke, confusion clear in his voice. Admiral, we are detecting a single vessel holding position directly ahead. Range 50,000 kilometers. Single vessel? Mordek moved to the sensor station. What class? What configuration? Unknown design, sir. Length approximately 800 meters. Mass consistent with a heavy cruiser. The vessel appears to be waiting. Mordek's implants flickered as he processed this information. A single ship facing his entire fleet. Either the humans were more foolish than their preliminary assessment suggested, or they possessed weapons technology that had somehow escaped detection. Scan for hidden vessels. Check for stealth signatures. Analyze their weapon configurations. The sensor sweep revealed nothing. One ship alone in the darkness between stars. Its hull design was crude compared to Kethmori biomechanics, but it showed signs of careful engineering. Weapons ports were visible along its sides, though the energy signatures suggested primitive projectile systems rather than advanced energy weapons. Sir, his communications officer reported, the human vessel is transmitting on standard diplomatic frequencies. Mordek almost laughed. Diplomatic frequencies, as if there was anything to negotiate. The Great Purge was not a conquest in the traditional sense. It was pest control on a galactic scale. Put them through, he ordered. Let us hear what these creatures have to say. The main screen shifted to show the interior of the human vessel. A male in a military uniform sat in what appeared to be their command center. His appearance was unremarkable. 2 arms, 2 legs, a single head with bilateral symmetry. Typical carbon-based evolution. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earth Navy vessel Valiant, the human said. You have entered territory claimed by the Human Federation. Please state your intentions and purpose for being here. The audacity was breathtaking. This tiny creature, commanding a ship that could fit inside Mordek's waste processing chamber, was demanding explanations from the Kethmori Empire. Mordek activated the communication system, allowing the human to see him in all his enhanced glory. I am Fleet Admiral Mordek of the Kethmori Empire. Your galaxy has been scheduled for purification. Your species, along with all others in this region, will be eliminated to make way for proper order. He expected panic, fear, desperate pleas for mercy. Instead, the human captain leaned back in his chair and studied Mordek with calm attention. I see, Morrison said. And I suppose you expect us to just stand aside while you commit genocide on billions of innocent people. Genocide is an incorrect term, Mordek replied. We are removing inferior life forms that contribute only chaos to the universe. Your resistance is futile. Submit now and your deaths will be swift. The human was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, an expression that Mordek found strangely unsettling. Well, Admiral, I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline your generous offer, Morrison said. Humanity doesn't give permission for you to pass through our space. If you want to proceed with your purification, you're going to have to go through us first. The communication ended. Mordek stared at the blank screen, processing what had just occurred. In 2 centuries of the Great Purge, no species had ever simply refused to surrender. They had fought, they had fled, they had begged, but none had ever looked at overwhelming odds and calmly stated their intention to resist. The human ship held position, blocking their path like a single grain of sand trying to stop an avalanche. It should have been amusing. Instead, Mordek found himself genuinely curious about what would happen next. Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of the UES Valiant, watching the largest ships he had ever seen hold position 50,000 kilometers ahead. The three alien vessels were so massive that his sensors had trouble calculating their exact dimensions. Each one could have swallowed his entire ship without noticing. "Captain," Chief Engineer Amy Collins said from her station, "I'm reading power signatures that don't match anything in our databases. Those ships are generating enough energy to power entire planets." Morrison nodded, keeping his expression calm for the sake of his crew. 400 souls under his command, all looking to him for guidance in a situation no human had ever faced before. First contact with an alien species, and they had announced their intention to wipe out humanity. "Lieutenant Commander Hayes," he said to his weapons officer, "what's our tactical assessment?" Rick Hayes checked his displays before responding. "Sir, those ships are armed with weapons we can't even identify. Energy readings suggest they could destroy cities with single shots. Our torpedoes and railguns might scratch their paint if we're lucky." The bridge fell silent. Everyone understood the mathematics of their situation. One human cruiser against 3 alien super dreadnoughts. It should have been over before it began. "Navigation Specialist Park," Morrison continued. "How long until Earth Command responds to our transmission?" Lisa Park consulted her communication panel. "Signal will reach Earth in 6 hours, sir. Response time depends on what forces they can deploy. Nearest fleet elements are the Independence Battle Group, currently 18 hours away at maximum burn." Morrison stood and walked to the main view screen. The alien ships waited like patient predators, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with organic light patterns. He had stared death in the face during the Mars Colonial War, but this was different. This wasn't about territory or resources. These creatures wanted to exterminate every human being in the galaxy. "Sir," Communications Specialist Danny Lee reported, "I'm receiving another transmission from the lead alien vessel." "Put it through." The screen flickered to show the alien commander again. The creature's forearms moved in complex gestures, while biomechanical implants along his face glowed with inner light. Morrison had seen combat veterans with prosthetic limbs, but this being had integrated technology into his very biology. "Human Morrison," the alien said, "I am curious about your response. Your vessel cannot harm my ships. Your species possesses no weapons capable of stopping our advance. Yet you remain here blocking our path. Explain this behavior." Morrison clasped his hands behind his back, a habit from his academy days. "It's quite simple, Admiral Mordek. This is our home. These are our people. We don't surrender them to anyone, regardless of the odds." "Your home will be sterilized regardless of your actions," Mordek replied. "Your people will be eliminated regardless of your sacrifice. Your resistance serves no logical purpose." "Maybe not," Morrison admitted. "But sometimes the right thing to do isn't the logical thing. Sometimes you have to make a stand even when you know you can't win." The alien's head tilted in what might have been confusion. "You acknowledge that your resistance is futile, yet you continue. Are humans suffering from some form of mental defect?" Morrison almost smiled. "Probably. We've been making stupid, impossible stands for thousands of years. Usually gets us killed. But sometimes, just sometimes, it makes a difference." He gestured to his crew. "Every person on this ship volunteered to be here, Admiral. We sent out a general broadcast when your fleet was detected. Called for volunteers to crew a ship that would probably be destroyed in the first engagement. We had to turn people away." Mordek was silent for several moments. "This behavior pattern is unknown to us. In 2 centuries of purification, no species has ever chosen certain death over possible survival." "Then you haven't met the right species," Morrison replied. "Earth Command offered to evacuate this sector. Told us to fall back to prepared defensive positions, but someone had to buy time for the colonies to evacuate. Someone had to show you that humanity won't just roll over and die quietly." Chief Engineer Collins caught Morrison's attention with a subtle hand signal. She had been running diagnostics on their weapon systems, looking for any possible advantage. Her expression told him what he already knew. They had no military options that would matter against ships of this magnitude. But Morrison had not earned his command by giving up when the odds were bad. He had earned it by finding ways to make bad odds work for him. "Admiral," he said, turning back to the screen, "you say you've been doing this purification for 200 years. May I ask why?" Mordek's implants flickered. "Inferior species create chaos. They wage wars over resources and territory. They develop weapons of mass destruction. They pollute their environments and fight among themselves instead of achieving proper order. And you've decided that the solution is to kill everyone. Correct. We represent the pinnacle of evolution. We have eliminated the disorders that plague lesser species. Through us, the universe will achieve perfect harmony. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. I see. And in these 200 years, how many species have you encountered that actually threatened you? How many possessed weapons that could destroy your ships or technology that exceeded your own? The alien was quiet for a moment. That information is irrelevant, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been exterminating civilizations that couldn't possibly harm you. That's not evolution, Admiral. That's just bullying on a galactic scale. Mordek's biomechanical features shifted into what might have been anger. You dare question the judgment of the Kethmori Empire? We have brought order to countless worlds. We have eliminated suffering by removing the sources of conflict. You've eliminated life, Morrison corrected. There's a difference. Life is messy and chaotic and unpredictable, but it's also beautiful and creative and worth preserving, even if it inconveniences your perfect order. The communication ended abruptly. Morrison turned to find his crew staring at him with expressions ranging from admiration to terror. He had just lectured an alien admiral commanding ships that could destroy planets. Sir, Lieutenant Commander Hayes said quietly, do you really think talking to them will change anything? Morrison returned to his command chair. Probably not. But every minute we keep them talking is another minute for people to evacuate. And maybe, just maybe, we can make them think about what they're doing. Amy Collins approached his chair. Captain, I've been analyzing their ship configurations. Those vessels aren't just warships. They're mobile cities, maybe even entire worlds. The population aboard each one could number in the millions. What's your point, Chief? A civilization that builds ships like that has had time to develop philosophy, culture, maybe even art. They're not just mindless killers. There might be a way to reach them. Morrison considered this. The Kethmori had clearly advanced beyond anything humanity could imagine, but they had also convinced themselves that genocide was a moral necessity. Perhaps their very advancement had become a weakness. Danny, he said to his communications officer, start recording everything. Full sensor logs, all communications, tactical assessments. If we don't make it out of this, maybe someone else can learn from what happened here. Already on it, sir, Lee replied. I've also been broadcasting our position to every human settlement within range. They know we're here. They know what we're facing. Navigation Specialist Park looked up from her console. Captain, I'm detecting movement in the alien formation. The smaller ships are spreading out, taking flanking positions. Morrison studied the tactical display. The enemy vessels were beautiful in their alien way, their biomechanical hulls flowing like living tissue. But they were also positioning themselves for an attack that would leave the Valiant with no escape route. All hands, he announced over the ship's communication system. This is the captain. As you all know, we are currently facing impossible odds against an enemy that wants to exterminate our species. In a few hours, other human ships will arrive, but they'll be just as outnumbered as we are. He paused, looking around the bridge at faces he had come to know over 3 years of service together. Good people. People with families and dreams and futures that might end in the next few hours. I won't lie to you, he continued. Our chances of survival are not good. But our job isn't to survive. Our job is to stand here in this spot and show these aliens that humanity doesn't back down from a fight. Even an impossible one. The response was immediate. From every station on the bridge, from every deck of the ship, came acknowledgments of understanding. Not resignation, but determination. 400 people choosing to face certain death rather than abandon their post. Morrison felt a surge of pride that surprised him with its intensity. This was what made humanity worth saving. Not their weapons or their technology or their territorial achievements. Their willingness to sacrifice everything for principles that existed only in their hearts and minds. The alien ships continued their approach, massive and terrible and seemingly unstoppable. But the UES Valiant held position, a tiny spark of defiance in the darkness between stars. Admiral Susan Blake stood in the Earth Command Operations Center, staring at the holographic display that showed the impossible situation developing at the Galaxy's rim. The Valiant, a single heavy cruiser, faced 3 alien superweapons that dwarfed anything in human military history. Yet Captain Morrison continued to hold his position. How long since last contact? She asked Colonel Maria Santos, commander of the 5th Marine Expeditionary Force. 4 hours and counting, Admiral, Santos replied. Morrison, still broadcasting his position, still demanding the aliens state their peaceful intentions. They're talking, but they're also moving into attack formation. Blake studied the sensor data streaming in from the Valiant's long-range communications array. The alien ships were magnificent and terrifying, their biomechanical construction unlike anything human science had theorized. Each vessel generated power signatures that exceeded Earth's entire electrical grid. "Have we made contact with the Independence Battle Group?" "Captain Williams is pushing his engines past safety limits," Santos reported. "He'll be there in 14 hours with 2 battleships, 4 cruisers, and my Marines." Not enough to win, but enough to make a statement. Dr. Nathan Cole entered the operations center carrying a data pad filled with preliminary analysis. As Earth's leading expert on xenobiology and theoretical alien psychology, his insights could determine humanity's response to first contact. "What have you learned about our visitors, Doctor?" Blake asked. Cole adjusted his glasses and consulted his notes. "The Kethmori appear to be a supremacist species that has convinced itself that genocide is a moral imperative. They view other life forms as inferior chaos that must be eliminated to achieve perfect order. Any weaknesses we can exploit? Possibly. Their decision to communicate rather than attack immediately suggests they follow some form of honor code. They're intrigued by Morrison's defiance because it doesn't fit their understanding of inferior species." Blake nodded thoughtfully. Morrison was buying them time, but time for what? Earth's entire deep space fleet consisted of 12 major vessels scattered across human space. Even if they could assemble every ship, they would still be hopelessly outnumbered. "Admiral," Communications Officer Lieutenant Kate Morris announced, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Captain Morrison." Blake moved to the main communication console. Morrison's image appeared on the screen, showing the stress of maintaining a hopeless position for hours, but his voice remained calm and professional. "Earth Command, this is Morrison aboard the Valiant. The alien commander has agreed to extended negotiations. He seems curious about human psychology and military doctrine. I'm sharing historical files about human conflicts, particularly battles where small forces held against overwhelming odds." Blake leaned forward. "Captain, what's their reaction?" "Confusion, mostly. They can't understand why humans would choose certain death over surrender. Their species appears to have eliminated individual decision-making in favor of collective consciousness. The concept of personal sacrifice for abstract principles is foreign to them." Dr. Cole stepped into view of the communication pickup. "Captain Morrison, this is Dr. Cole. Try sharing information about human creativity and diversity. Show them examples of art, music, literature. Make them understand what they would be destroying." Morrison nodded. "Understood, Doctor." "Admiral, I need to know, are you sending reinforcements?" "Every ship we can spare," Blake replied. "Captain Williams will arrive with the Independence Battle Group in less than 14 hours. Colonel Santos and her Marines are aboard." "Marines?" Morrison almost smiled. "They do realize this is a space battle, not a planetary assault?" Santos stepped forward. "Captain, Marines go where Marines are needed. If you're making humanity's last stand, we want to be there." The communication flickered as the Valiant's power system strained to maintain long-range contact. Morrison's image stabilized after a few seconds. "Admiral, there's something else. The aliens keep talking about their Great Purge, 2 centuries of eliminating what they call inferior species, but they've never encountered serious resistance. Every civilization they've destroyed was helpless against their technology." Blake exchanged glances with Dr. Cole. "What are you thinking, Captain?" "I think they've become so used to easy victories that they don't know how to handle real opposition. They've built their entire philosophy around the idea that might makes right, but they've never had to prove it against an enemy that fights back." Dr. Cole nodded enthusiastically. "That fits the psychological profile. Supremacist ideologies often crumble when faced with evidence that contradicts their core beliefs. If you can make them question their assumptions—" "I understand," Morrison replied. "I'll keep them talking as long as possible." Morrison out. The communication ended, leaving the operations center in tense silence. Blake studied the tactical displays, calculating arrival times and force compositions. Even with every human ship in the sector, they would be facing impossible odds. "Colonel Santos," she said, "prepare your Marines for boarding actions. If we can't win through firepower, maybe we can win through personal combat." Santos grinned. "Marines excel at impossible situations, Admiral." "We'll be ready." Blake turned to her staff officers. "Contact every human settlement within 50 light years. I want evacuations to begin immediately. If we can't stop these aliens, we need to save as many people as possible." What about the core worlds? Asked her intelligence officer, Commander Paul Davis. Earth, Mars, the Luna colonies? We evacuate who we can and prepare the rest for siege. If humanity is going to die, we'll die fighting. Orders went out across human space as the largest evacuation in history began. Colony ships loaded with refugees departed for distant systems, while military vessels converged on the confrontation point. It would not be enough, but it would be something. Meanwhile, light hours away, the Valiant continued its impossible stand. Captain Morrison sat in his command chair, sharing human history with creatures who viewed history as chaos to be eliminated. He told them about Thermopylae, where 300 Spartans held a pass against the Persian Empire. He described the Alamo, where a handful of defenders chose death over surrender. He explained the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, where the oppressed fought back against overwhelming odds not because they could win, but because resistance itself had meaning. The alien admiral, Mordek, listened with growing fascination. His species had achieved perfect order by eliminating the variables that made such stories possible. Individual choice, personal sacrifice, the willingness to die for abstract concepts. These were alien concepts to the Keth Mori. Your species appears to suffer from a form of collective insanity, Mordek observed during one of their conversations. You choose suffering over peace, chaos over order, death over submission. This behavior serves no evolutionary purpose. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Maybe not from your perspective. But those choices are what make us human. Take them away and we become something else entirely. Something less than what we were. You would prefer death to improvement? I would prefer choice to inevitability, Morrison replied. Your perfect order sounds a lot like slavery to me. The alien commander was silent for long minutes. Finally, he spoke again. You will continue this conversation after we have eliminated your reinforcements. What reinforcements? Morrison asked innocently. The 12 vessels approaching from your core systems. Did you think we would not detect them? Morrison felt his heart sink. The Independence battle group was still hours away, but the aliens had already spotted them. Humanity's last hope was walking into a trap. Admiral Mordek, he said carefully, those ships are carrying thousands of people who have families, children, futures. They're coming here not because they think they can win, but because they believe some things are worth dying for. Doesn't that deserve some consideration? It deserves the same consideration we have given all inferior species, Mordek replied. None. The communication ended, leaving Morrison staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew continued their duties with quiet professionalism. They all knew that reinforcements were coming and that those reinforcements would share their fate. Chief Engineer Amy Collins approached his chair. Captain, I've been thinking about what Dr. Cole said, about making them question their assumptions. Go on. These aliens have spent 2 centuries exterminating helpless civilizations. They've never had to justify their actions to an equal opponent. Maybe that's our real weapon. Not our guns or our ships, but our questions. Morrison nodded slowly. Collins was right. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to ask difficult questions, to challenge established authority, to demand explanations for the unexplainable. Amy, compile everything we know about human philosophy, ethics, and moral reasoning. If we're going to die, let's at least make them think about why they're killing us. The engineer smiled grimly. Already on it, sir. If we can't stop them with weapons, maybe we can stop them with words. Outside, the alien fleet continued its patient approach, confident in their overwhelming superiority. But for the first time in 2 centuries of conquest, they faced an enemy that refused to be conquered quietly. 3 days had passed since the Valiant first encountered the Keth Mori fleet. The human ship maintained its position like a lighthouse in a storm, broadcasting defiance across the void, while alien superweapons slowly closed the distance. Captain Morrison had not slept in 36 hours. Chief Engineer Amy Collins worked in the bowels of the ship, pushing their fusion reactors beyond safe parameters. Her engineering team had volunteered for a suicide mission, overloading the reactor core to create an explosion massive enough to damage one of the smaller Keth Mori vessels. It would vaporize the Valiant instantly, but might prove that humans could hurt their enemies. How much longer do you need? Morrison asked over the internal communication system. 6 more hours to complete the modifications, Collins replied, wiping sweat from her forehead. But Captain, This will only work if we can get within 5,000 kilometers of their hull. Our reactor explosion won't penetrate their shields at greater distance. Morrison understood. The Valiant would have to charge directly into the alien formation, absorbing weapons fire that could destroy continents, just for the chance to inflict minor damage on one enemy ship. It was mathematical suicide with a microscopic chance of tactical value. But it was better than dying without purpose. Dr. Elena Martinez moved through the ship's corridors, checking on crew members who struggled with the psychological pressure of their situation. Many sailors had written final messages to their families, understanding they would likely not survive the coming battle. But morale remained surprisingly high. "Captain," she reported from the medical bay, "I've completed psychological evaluations on the crew. Stress levels are high, as expected, but determination remains strong. People are scared, but they're not breaking." Martinez had served in the Mars Colonial War, treating soldiers who faced death daily. But this was different. These weren't professional warriors dying for territory or resources. These were ordinary people choosing to sacrifice their lives for an abstract principle, the right of their species to continue. Existing Lieutenant Commander Rick Hayes spent his time analyzing every detail of Kethmori's ship, construction that their sensors could detect. His weapons teams prepared specialized torpedo loads designed to exploit theoretical weaknesses in biomechanical hulls, though their limited ammunition meant each shot had to count. "I've identified potential vulnerabilities in their power coupling systems," he reported to Morrison during a brief tactical meeting. "If we can target the organic interfaces between their biological and mechanical components, we might cause cascading failures." "How confident are you in this assessment?" Hayes hesitated. "Honestly, sir, I'm guessing. Their technology is so far beyond ours that I'm basically throwing darts at a board and hoping something sticks." Morrison appreciated his honesty. Humanity's weapons were primitive compared to what they faced, but Hayes and his teams continued working as if their preparations mattered. Perhaps they did. Perhaps the act of resistance itself had value beyond its tactical effectiveness. Communications Specialist Corporal Danny Lee maintained contact with Earth, broadcasting humanity's first stand against alien invasion to every inhabited world. The story spread throughout human space, inspiring colonists and military forces alike. Children on distant worlds heard about the brave ship holding the line against impossible odds. "Sir," Lee reported, "I'm receiving messages from across human space. Colony militias are mobilizing. Civilian vessels are volunteering to join the defense fleet. People are naming their children after our crew members." Morrison felt a strange mixture of pride and sorrow. The Valiant had become a symbol of human resistance, but symbols often died to maintain their meaning. Still, knowing that their sacrifice inspired others made the mathematics of their situation more bearable. The alien fleet commander, Admiral Mordek, had grown increasingly curious about human psychology. His communications with Morrison revealed a species unlike any the Kethmori had encountered. These humans acknowledged their military inferiority, but refused to accept defeat. They spoke of concepts like honor, dignity, and freedom as if these abstractions had physical reality. "Explain to me again why your species chooses death over survival," Mordek said during one of their extended conversations. Morrison thought carefully before responding. "It's not that we choose death over survival. We choose meaning over meaninglessness. A life spent in slavery to your perfect order wouldn't be survival. It would be existence without purpose. Purpose is defined by efficiency and order. Your chaos serves no function. Our chaos creates things your order never could," Morrison replied. He gestured to his bridge crew. "Look at them. Each person here made an individual choice to be here, knowing they would probably die. That choice creates something beautiful, a willingness to sacrifice for others." Mordek's biomechanical features shifted in what might have been contemplation. "Your species has an unusual definition of beauty." Morrison smiled sadly. "Maybe that's what makes us worth preserving." The Kethmori commander was silent for several minutes. When he spoke again, his tone carried subtle uncertainty. "In 2 centuries of purification, we have never encountered a species that argued for its own preservation. Most beg for mercy or attempt negotiation for reduced casualties. You do neither, because there's nothing to negotiate. You want to exterminate us, and we won't let that happen quietly. Either you'll succeed and we'll die fighting, or you'll decide we're worth keeping alive." But we won't beg. Even when begging might save some of your people. Morrison considered this. If we begged and you spared a few humans as curiosities or slaves, would that really be saving them? Or would it just be a slower form of extinction? The alien admiral had no immediate answer. His species had achieved perfect harmony by eliminating individual will and emotional response. The humans before him possessed both qualities in abundance, and their presence created philosophical problems that the Keth-Mori collective consciousness struggled to resolve. As the standoff continued, other human ships began arriving in the system. The battleship UES Independence emerged from hyperspace with Captain Pete Williams commanding a mixed force of cruisers and destroyers. The vessels took defensive positions around the Valiant, adding their modest firepower to humanity's desperate stand. Colonel Maria Santos transported aboard the Valiant with a contingent of her best Marines. She found Morrison on the bridge, still maintaining his vigil against overwhelming odds. "Captain," she said with military formality. "Colonel Santos reporting for duty. My Marines are ready to board alien vessels if the opportunity arises." Morrison looked at the tough, competent woman who had volunteered to join a hopeless battle. "Colonel, you do realize this is likely a suicide mission?" Santos grinned. "Sir, all the best missions are. Besides, Marines don't get to choose their battles. We just win them." Her confidence was infectious. Around the bridge, crew members straightened slightly, drawing strength from the presence of humanity's elite soldiers. If the Marines thought this fight was worth joining, then perhaps they had a chance after all. The tactical situation remained impossible. 12 human ships faced 3 alien superweapons supported by dozens of smaller vessels. But the humans were no longer alone in the darkness. They faced annihilation together, united by a common refusal to surrender quietly. Admiral Mordek observed the human reinforcements with growing puzzlement. Logic suggested that intelligent beings would preserve their lives when facing certain destruction. Yet more humans continued arriving, voluntarily joining what they knew to be a hopeless battle. "Your reinforcements change nothing," he informed Morrison during their next communication. "You remain vastly outnumbered and outgunned." "I know," Morrison replied. "But we're not here to win, Admiral. We're here to show you what you're destroying. Every ship, every person, every choice to stand and fight. That's humanity. That's what you want to eliminate from the universe." Mordek studied the human fleet disposition through his sensors. The ships were primitive but well organized, their crews displaying the same irrational courage as their captain. It should have been amusing, but the alien commander found himself troubled by questions he had never considered before. What if the humans were right? What if their chaos and disorder created something valuable that perfect order could never achieve? What if the Great Purge was eliminating the very diversity that made the universe interesting? These were dangerous thoughts for a member of the collective consciousness. But 3 days of conversation with Captain Morrison had planted seeds of doubt that grew stronger with each passing hour. Admiral Mordek stood alone in his private chambers aboard the Absolute Judgment, staring at displays showing human cultural data that Captain Morrison had transmitted. Images of Earth's art, recordings of human music, and samples of literature filled the screens around him. For the first time in decades, he had dismissed his staff and sought solitude. The biomechanical implants covering half his body pulsed with confused signals. His collective consciousness integration had been perfect for over a century. But the human captain's words had created strange disruptions in his mental harmony. Questions arose where there should have been certainty. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication from the Keth-Mori High Command. War Leader Sekthar's image appeared on the main screen, his forearms crossed in ritual challenge posture. "Admiral Mordek," Sekthar said, his voice carrying disapproval. "You have delayed the purification for 3 standard cycles. Explain this inefficiency." Mordek composed himself before responding. "The humans present an unusual psychological profile. Their resistance patterns do not match any recorded species behavior. I am conducting extended analysis before proceeding with elimination protocols. Analysis is unnecessary. They are inferior beings that must be cleansed. Their resistance is irrelevant." "Perhaps," Mordek replied carefully, "but their willingness to die for abstract concepts suggests cognitive development that merits study. They may possess knowledge or perspectives that could benefit the collective." Sekthar's biomechanical features shifted into obvious anger. You speak like the old philosophers before our ascension to perfection. Individual perspectives are chaos. Only the collective wisdom matters. Eliminate the humans immediately. The communication ended, leaving Mordek to contemplate his superior's orders. Sekthar represented traditional Kethmori thinking, efficient, logical, uncompromising. But the war leader had never spoken with Captain Morrison, never heard humans argue passionately for concepts like freedom and dignity. A second chime announced another communication request. This time Sage Navigator Velthera appeared on screen. Unlike Sekthar's aggressive posture, she maintained the contemplative stance of the intellectual caste. "Admiral," she said, "I have been monitoring your conversations with the human commander. Their species displays remarkable psychological complexity. Before we eliminate them, perhaps we should consider what we might learn from their unusual development." Mordek felt relief at finding someone who shared his growing uncertainty. "Your thoughts, Sage Navigator?" "These humans have achieved spaceflight and interstellar colonization, while maintaining individual consciousness and emotional response. Our own species eliminated these traits millennia ago in pursuit of perfect order. Yet the humans use their chaos to create art, literature, music, expressions of beauty that our collective cannot produce." Velthara paused, her own implants flickering with processing activity. "What if we have achieved perfection at the cost of eliminating something valuable? What if their disorder creates things that our order cannot?" The question struck at the foundation of Kethmori philosophy. For 2 centuries, they had justified the Great Purge by claiming that chaos led only to suffering and waste. But the humans had used their chaos to create beauty, to inspire sacrifice, to build civilizations that chose principles over survival. "Do you suggest we spare them?" Mordek asked. "I suggest we study them more carefully before making irreversible decisions. The universe is vast. If these humans possess unique qualities, eliminating them would reduce the diversity of existence. Perhaps perfection requires preserving some chaos." The communication ended, leaving Mordek alone with his doubts. 2 of the most influential voices in Kethmori society had expressed opposite viewpoints. The collective consciousness that usually provided clear guidance now offered contradictory wisdom. He activated a secure channel to the human vessel, requesting another conversation with Captain Morrison. When the connection established, the human captain looked exhausted but remained alert and professional. "Admiral Mordek," Morrison said, "I assume you're calling to tell us you're ready to begin your attack?" "Perhaps," Mordek replied. "But first I have questions about your species' development. You have achieved technological advancement while maintaining individual consciousness. How is this possible without degenerating into chaos?" Morrison leaned forward, sensing an opportunity. "Because chaos isn't the opposite of order, Admiral. It's the source of creativity. Yes, we fight wars and make mistakes and waste resources on seemingly pointless activities. But we also create music that moves people to tears, write stories that inspire generations, and make scientific discoveries by asking questions that have no obvious answers. Your wars cause suffering. Your individualism leads to conflict." "True," Morrison admitted, "but our wars also teach us about sacrifice and courage. Our conflicts force us to examine our beliefs and improve them. Perfect order might eliminate suffering, but it also eliminates growth." Mordek processed this concept. The Kethmori had indeed achieved perfection by eliminating variables that caused problems. But in doing so, they had also eliminated variables that caused innovation and discovery. "Show me," the Admiral said. "Demonstrate how your chaos creates value." Morrison smiled and gestured to his crew. "Look around you, Admiral. Every person on this ship made an individual choice to be here. Our chief engineer, Amy Collins, volunteered to modify our reactors into a weapon that will destroy us all, just for the chance to prove we can fight back. Lieutenant Commander Hayes spent 3 days analyzing your ships with equipment that's centuries behind yours, looking for ways to hurt you with weapons you could swat aside like insects." The captain stood and walked to his view screen. "Dr. Martinez treats crew members who are scared and homesick and facing certain death, not because she has to, but because she believes their well-being matters. Communications Specialist Lee broadcasts our position to Earth even though it serves no tactical purpose, because he wants our families to know we didn't give up." Morrison turned back to face the camera. "None of this makes logical sense, Admiral. But it makes human sense, and that difference might be worth preserving." Mordek found himself studying each human face visible on the bridge. They showed fear, determination, exhaustion, hope, emotional states that Kethmori conditioning had eliminated as inefficient variables. Yet these variables seem to enhance rather than diminish their performance. Your emotional responses should impair your decision-making, the Admiral observed. Sometimes they do, Morrison agreed, but they also motivate us to achieve things that pure logic never could. Love makes us fight harder to protect our families. Hope gives us strength when situations seem impossible. Even anger can drive us to overcome obstacles that should stop us. The human captain paused. Admiral, may I ask you something personal? Mordek hesitated, then nodded. When you achieved your perfect collective consciousness, what did you give up? What did your species lose when it eliminated individual choice and emotional response? The question struck deeper than any weapon. Mordek's biomechanical implants flickered as he processed memories from before his integration into the collective. Faint recollections of personal desires, individual dreams, the satisfaction of making unique contributions to shared goals. We eliminated inefficiency, he said slowly. We removed variables that caused conflict and disorder. But what else did you remove? Morrison pressed gently. What did those variables create before you eliminated them? Mordek was silent for long minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice carried an emotion that the collective consciousness had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty. I do not know, he admitted. We have no records of what we chose to forget. Morrison nodded sadly. That's the tragedy, isn't it? You became so focused on eliminating problems that you forgot to ask what you were losing in the process. The communication ended, but Mordek continued staring at the blank screen. For the first time since his integration into the collective consciousness, he wondered if perfection was worth its price, and for the first time in 2 centuries of the Great Purge, he questioned whether eliminating chaos might eliminate something irreplaceable. The human fleet waited in the darkness, 12 small ships facing destruction, but refusing to surrender. Their defiance had become more than military resistance. It had become a philosophical challenge that threatened the foundation of everything the Kethmori believed about themselves and their mission in the universe. The Kethmori High Command Chamber had not seen debate in over 3 centuries. The massive biomechanical structure floating in deep space served as the collective consciousness's decision-making center, where perfect harmony usually produced instant consensus. Today, that harmony fractured like brittle crystal. War leader Sekthar stood before the assembled command council, his 4 arms spread in aggressive display. Admiral Mordek's delay is unacceptable. The humans are insignificant insects that should have been eliminated days ago. His hesitation demonstrates contamination by inferior thought patterns. Sage Navigator Velthara maintained her contemplative posture at the opposite end of the chamber. The Admiral's caution may be warranted. These humans exhibit psychological characteristics that we have never encountered. Their willingness to die for abstract concepts suggests cognitive evolution that merits study. The debate split the Kethmori leadership for the first time since their species achieved collective consciousness. Traditional voices supported immediate elimination of the human threat, while philosophical voices argued for careful analysis of this unprecedented situation. Study them? Sekthar's biomechanical implants flared with anger. We have studied 10,000 species over 2 centuries. All proved inferior. All were eliminated. These humans are no different. They are completely different, Velthara countered. Every species we have encountered either surrendered immediately or fought desperately for survival. The humans acknowledge their military inferiority, but continue resisting anyway. They fight not to live, but to preserve something they value more than life itself. Fleet Coordinator Thexmore, the eldest member of the council, spoke from his position at the chamber's center. Explain how this behavior benefits their species' survival. What evolutionary advantage does choosing death over submission provide? Velthara accessed her analysis files and projected them into the chamber's shared consciousness. The humans call it inspiration. Their willingness to die for principles motivates others to greater achievements. Captain Morrison's resistance has already inspired human colonies across their galaxy to begin military preparations. Preparations that will be irrelevant against our superior technology. Sekthar interrupted, perhaps, but consider this. In 3 days, a single human captain has forced our collective consciousness to debate philosophy for the first time in centuries. His words have created uncertainty where perfect certainty existed. If one primitive human can accomplish this, what might their entire species achieve given time? The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The collective consciousness prided itself on perfect logical consistency. The fact that human arguments could create doubt suggested either that their logic was flawed or that the humans possessed insights the collective lacked. Thexmore processed the debate with ancient wisdom. War Leader Sekthar, your position maintains traditional doctrine. Sage Navigator Velthera, your position suggests doctrinal revision. Admiral Mordek must choose between them. Meanwhile, aboard the Absolute Judgment, Mordek faced his own internal crisis. The collective consciousness that had guided him for over a century now offered contradictory guidance. Some voices demanded immediate human elimination, while others urged careful study. The perfect harmony he had known since integration was replaced by chaotic uncertainty. He requested another communication with Captain Morrison, hoping the human's perspective might clarify his confusion. When the connection established, Morrison appeared even more exhausted than before, but his determination remained unshaken. Admiral, Morrison said, I assume you're calling to deliver an ultimatum. I am calling to request clarification, Mordek replied. Your resistance has created complications within our command structure. For the first time in centuries, our collective consciousness cannot reach unanimous agreement about proper action. Morrison raised his eyebrows in surprise. You're having an argument? We do not argue. We analyze and reach optimal conclusions through shared processing. But your behavior patterns do not fit any established analytical framework. Some of our leaders view this as a problem requiring elimination. Others view it as a phenomenon requiring study. The human captain leaned back in his chair. What do you view it as, Admiral? Mordek hesitated. Speaking his personal thoughts rather than collective wisdom felt strange after decades of integration. I am uncertain. Your species challenges fundamental assumptions about the relationship between order and progress. If you are correct that chaos creates valuable developments, then our purification protocols may be incomplete. Incomplete how? We have eliminated millions of species over 2 centuries, assuming that their disorder contributed nothing of value to universal development. But if chaos can create beauty, inspiration, and innovation that pure order cannot achieve, then we may have destroyed irreplaceable elements of cosmic evolution. Morrison nodded slowly. Admiral, may I suggest something that might help resolve your uncertainty? Proceed. Send a representative to visit our ship, not to negotiate surrender or discuss military tactics, but to observe humanity directly. Let one of your people see how our chaos actually functions in practice. The suggestion was unprecedented. In 2 centuries of purification, the Keth Mori had never studied living specimens of species marked for elimination. Their analyses were always conducted from distance, through sensor data and communication intercepts. Such interaction would violate established protocols, Mordek said. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from violating established protocols, Morrison replied. Your species achieved perfection by eliminating variables, but maybe some variables are worth preserving. You'll never know unless you examine them closely. The communication ended, leaving Mordek to consider this radical proposal. Allowing direct contact between Keth Mori personnel and human subjects would expose his people to the psychological contamination that his superiors feared. But it might also provide definitive answers to questions that debate alone could not resolve. He opened a secure channel to Sage Navigator Velthera, knowing she would be most receptive to unconventional approaches. Sage Navigator, he said, the humans have proposed direct observation protocols. They suggest that close study of their social dynamics might resolve our analytical uncertainties. Velthera's image showed interest. Fascinating. They volunteer to be studied by the species that intends to eliminate them. This itself demonstrates their unusual psychological profile. War. Leader Sekthar would view such contact as dangerous contamination. War. Leader Sekthar fears that exposure to human chaos might disrupt our collective harmony. But perhaps some disruption is necessary for continued evolution. We have achieved perfect stasis, Admiral. Perfect stasis is indistinguishable from death. The conversation continued for several hours as they developed a proposal for the High Command. A small delegation would transport to the human vessel to conduct direct observation of their decision-making processes. social structures, and creative activities. The data gathered would either confirm human inferiority or demonstrate qualities worth preserving. It was a dangerous experiment that could contaminate Kethmori personnel with individual thoughts and emotional responses, but it was also the only way to definitively answer the questions that Captain Morrison had raised. The proposal went to the High Command, where it created even deeper divisions. Traditional voices viewed it as unacceptable risk, while progressive voices saw it as necessary research. The debate raged for hours while the human fleet waited in the darkness, unaware that their fate depended on an alien philosophical argument taking place light years away. Finally, Fleet Coordinator Thexmore rendered judgment. The proposal is approved, but with strict limitations. One observer will visit the human vessel for a maximum of 6 standard hours. All interaction will be recorded and analyzed by the collective consciousness. If contamination occurs, purification protocols will be implemented immediately. Sage Navigator Velthera volunteered to serve as observer, accepting the risk that exposure to human chaos might permanently alter her integration with the collective consciousness. It was a sacrifice that demonstrated the same irrational courage that the humans displayed. Though neither species recognized the parallel, preparations began for the most unprecedented diplomatic contact in Kethmori history. For the first time in 2 centuries, one of their kind would walk among the species they intended to eliminate, seeking to understand rather than destroy. The outcome would determine not only humanity's fate, but the future direction of an empire that had conquered galaxies in pursuit of perfect order. The transport beam materialized in the Valiant's main cargo bay, revealing a figure that made several Marines reach for their weapons. Sage Navigator Velthara stood over 2.5 meters tall, her biomechanical enhancements more extensive than Admiral Mordek's. 3 of her 4 arms contained integrated sensor arrays, while her skull showed clear evidence of cybernetic modification, yet her posture conveyed curious observation rather than threat. Captain Morrison stepped forward, flanked by Colonel Santos and Dr. Martinez. The first face-to-face meeting between humans and Kethmori carried risks that could end in immediate violence if either side misinterpreted the other's intentions. "Joe, Navigator Velthara," Morrison said, offering a formal military salute. "Welcome aboard the UES Valiant. I'm Captain Jake Morrison." Velthara's head tilted as her sensors analyzed human body language and vocal patterns. "Captain Morrison, your species' greeting ritual involves physical gesture and verbal acknowledgement. This suggests social hierarchy and mutual respect protocols." "That's right. We believe in showing courtesy to visitors even when we disagree with their ultimate goals." The alien's biomechanical features shifted in what might have been surprise. "You extend courtesy to those who intend your elimination? This behavior pattern contradicts survival optimization." Dr. Martinez stepped forward. "Not all human behavior is optimized for survival, Sage Navigator. Some of our actions are optimized for meaning, dignity, and the preservation of values we consider more important than individual existence." Velthara's sensor arrays focused on the doctor with intense interest. "Demonstrate this concept. Show me how your species prioritizes abstract values over concrete survival requirements." Morrison exchanged glances with Santos and Martinez before nodding. "Follow me." He led the alien delegation through the ship's corridors, past crew members who stared openly at their visitor but maintained professional composure. The first stop was the engineering section, where Chief Engineer Amy Collins worked on her reactor modification project. "Chief Collins," Morrison announced, "I'd like you to explain your current assignment to our guest." Collins looked up from her work, grease-stained and exhausted but still focused. "I'm modifying our fusion reactors to create a massive explosion that will vaporize our ship but potentially damage one of your vessels. It's basically an elaborate suicide attack with minimal tactical value." Velthera's sensors analyzed the modifications with growing confusion. "Your efforts will result in certain death with limited probability of inflicting meaningful damage on our forces. Why do you continue this work?" Collins wiped her hands on a rag before answering. "Because sometimes doing something is better than doing nothing, even when that something is stupid and pointless. We can't stop your fleet, but we can make you remember that we fought back. Memory has no tactical significance to eliminated species." "Maybe not to you," Collins replied, "but it has significance to us, and maybe that's enough." The alien navigator made detailed recordings as they moved through the ship. Each interaction revealed human behavior patterns that defied logical analysis. Crew members worked at tasks they knew would end in their deaths. They shared personal stories and offered comfort to colleagues facing the same fate. They maintained equipment and followed protocols even though their situation was hopeless. In the medical bay, Dr. Martinez showed Velthara how she treated crew members suffering from stress and fear. This sailor is experiencing anxiety attacks because he has a wife and 2 children on Mars. He knows they'll be killed if your fleet reaches the core systems. Thara examined the patient with her biomechanical sensors. His psychological distress impairs his performance efficiency. Why not eliminate such individuals to optimize crew functionality? Martinez looked appalled. Because he's a person, not a machine component. His fear makes him human. His love for his family gives him a reason to fight harder, not weaker. Emotional attachment creates psychological vulnerability. Emotional attachment creates psychological strength, Martinez countered. This man will fight with desperate courage because he's protecting something he loves. Your collective consciousness might be more efficient, but our individual connections make us more determined. The alien's head tilted as she processed this contradiction. Her own species had eliminated emotional attachments as sources of irrationality and inefficiency. Yet the humans claimed these attachments enhanced rather than diminished their capabilities. Lieutenant Commander Hayes demonstrated human weapons technology, showing torpedo modifications designed to exploit theoretical weaknesses in Keth Mori hull construction. His explanations revealed both humanity's technological limitations and their creative approach to seemingly impossible problems. Our weapons are primitive compared to yours, Hayes admitted, but we've studied your ships for days looking for any possible weakness. These modifications probably won't work, but we have to try. Your efforts are based on insufficient data and flawed assumptions, Velthara observed. Probably, but sometimes flawed assumptions lead to unexpected discoveries. Human history is full of people who succeeded by refusing to accept that something was impossible. The tour continued to the ship's recreational areas, where off-duty crew members engaged in activities that Velthara found incomprehensible. Some played games with no productive purpose. Others created art that served no functional role. A small group practiced music that would never be heard outside their dying ship. Explain the purpose of these activities, Velthara requested. Morrison sat down at a table where several crew members were playing cards. They don't have a purpose in the tactical sense, but they remind us what makes life worth living. Even here, facing extinction, we maintain the things that make us human. These activities consume time and resources that could be allocated to survival preparations. True. But survival without humanity isn't really survival at all. It's just existence. The alien navigator spent her final hour in the ship's observation lounge, where large windows provided views of the surrounding space. The Keth Mori fleet hung in the darkness like mechanical angels of death, beautiful and terrible in their alien perfection. Captain Morrison joined her there, along with several senior officers who had volunteered to share their perspectives with humanity's would-be destroyer. What conclusions have you reached, Sage Navigator? Morrison asked. Velthara was silent for several minutes, her biomechanical systems processing observations that challenged fundamental assumptions about efficiency and order. When she finally spoke, her voice carried uncertainty that would have alarmed her collective consciousness. Your species exhibits behavior patterns that should result in rapid extinction through inefficient resource allocation and compromised decision-making, yet you have achieved interstellar civilization and demonstrated remarkable adaptability under stress. She paused, studying the human faces around her. Your emotional responses and individual choices create apparent weaknesses that somehow transform into strengths. Your willingness to die for abstract concepts should be evolutionary suicide, yet it inspires others to greater achievements. Morrison nodded. We're not perfect, Sage Navigator. We make mistakes, we fight among ourselves, we waste resources on things that might seem pointless to your collective consciousness. But those imperfections are part of what makes us creative, adaptable, and ultimately resilient. You suggest that perfection is inferior to chaos? I suggest that perfection without growth is just another form of death. Your species achieved perfect order by eliminating the variables that cause change. But change is how life adapts to new challenges. Without it, you become beautiful but static. like a crystal that can't evolve. Velthara's biomechanical implants flickered rapidly as she processed this concept. Her species had indeed achieved stasis through perfection, but they had interpreted this as victory rather than limitation. The humans suggested that their chaos enabled continued evolution, while Kethamori order prevented it. "I must return to my ship," she said finally. "My observations require analysis by the collective consciousness." As the transport beam prepared to return her to the absolute judgment, Velthara turned back to Morrison. "Captain, regardless of our final decision, your species has achieved something remarkable. You have forced a collective consciousness that has remained unchanged for millennia to question its fundamental assumptions. Is that good or bad from your perspective?" "I do not know," Velthara admitted, "but uncertainty itself may be more valuable than I previously understood." The alien navigator disappeared in a shimmer of energy, leaving the human crew to wait for a judgment that would determine their species' fate. They had shown their visitors the best and worst of humanity, the courage and fear, the creativity and chaos, the individual choices that created both beauty and disorder. Whether that demonstration would save them or condemn them remained to be seen. The Kethamori High Command Chamber buzzed with unprecedented activity as Sage Navigator Velthara transmitted her observations to the collective consciousness. For the first time in 3 centuries, perfect harmony shattered into competing interpretations of the same data. Admiral Mordek watched from his flagship as the debate raged across quantum communication channels. Velthara's report had documented human behaviors that challenged every assumption the collective had made about the relationship between order and progress, war leader. Sekthar's response was immediate and violent. "The navigator has been contaminated by exposure to human chaos. Her report demonstrates the exact psychological corruption we sought to avoid. The humans must be eliminated immediately, along with any Kethamori personnel who show signs of individual thought deviation." But other voices rose in opposition. Fleet Coordinator Thexmore, eldest of the Council, spoke with ancient authority. "Velthara's observations suggest that our understanding of universal development may be incomplete. If chaos can create valuable innovations that order cannot achieve, then we may have been eliminating beneficial elements of cosmic evolution." The debate split along philosophical lines that had not existed since the Kethamori achieved collective consciousness. Progressive voices argued for careful study of human potential, while traditional voices demanded immediate purification to prevent further contamination of collective thought patterns. Aboard the Absolute Judgment, Admiral Mordek felt the collective consciousness fragmenting around him. The perfect unity that had guided his decisions for over a century dissolved into competing perspectives, leaving him to make individual choices for the first time in decades. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet, where Captain Morrison waited with the patience of someone who had already accepted his fate. "Captain Morrison," Mordek said, "Sage Navigator Velthara has submitted her report to our High Command. Your species has created significant philosophical disagreement within our collective consciousness." Morrison leaned forward in his command chair. "What kind of disagreement?" "Some of our leaders view your behavior as proof of dangerous chaos that must be eliminated. Others view it as evidence of evolutionary potential that should be preserved. For the first time in our modern history, we cannot reach unanimous consensus. And what do you view it as, Admiral?" Mordek was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried an emotion the collective consciousness had not felt in centuries. Uncertainty mixed with something that might have been wonder. "I believe your species has taught us something important about the nature of existence. Perfect order may achieve efficiency, but it also eliminates the possibility of surprise, discovery, and growth. Your chaos creates beauty and inspiration that our perfection cannot match." The human captain nodded slowly. "So what happens now?" Before Mordek could answer, alarms sounded throughout his ship. War Leader Sekthar's voice echoed across all communication channels. "Admiral Mordek has been compromised by human contamination. As senior military commander, I am assuming control of the purification fleet. All vessels will commence elimination protocols immediately." The massive Kethamori formation began to shift as ships aligned themselves with opposing factions. Sekthar commanded the loyalty of traditional military units who viewed any deviation from established doctrine as dangerous weakness. but Mordek retained support from exploration and scientific vessels whose crews had been influenced by Velthara's observations. For the first time in over 2 millennia, the Kethmori Empire faced civil war. Morrison watched in amazement as alien superweapons turned on each other. Biomechanical hulls blazed with energy discharges that lit up the darkness between stars. The disciplined formation that had seemed invincible moments before dissolved into chaotic battle, as perfect order collapsed into competing philosophies. "Captain," Colonel Santos said from her position on the Valiant's bridge, "should we intervene?" Morrison considered the tactical situation. The human fleet could potentially tip the balance in favor of whichever Kethmori faction they supported. But interference might prove Sekthar's arguments about human chaos causing disorder. "Negative," he replied. "This is their choice to make. We hold position and observe." The battle raged for hours as weapons designed to destroy planets exchanged fire at point-blank range. Mordek's forces, though outnumbered, fought with desperate determination enhanced by something they had not experienced in centuries: individual motivation. Each crew member made personal choices about tactics and strategy, rather than following collective directives. Sekthar's traditionalist fleet maintained superior discipline and coordination, but they struggled to adapt when their opponents began exhibiting the same chaotic unpredictability that had characterized human resistance. The progressive Kethmori were learning to think like individuals, and individual thought created tactical surprises that collective consciousness could not anticipate. The decisive moment came when Sage Navigator, Velthara, made a choice that would have been impossible under the old system. Instead of following her assigned position in the formation, she broke away from Sekthar's command ship and rammed her vessel directly into his flagship's weapons array. The collision disabled Sekthar's primary armaments and demonstrated something the collective consciousness had never seen: one of their own, choosing certain death to protect an abstract principle. Velthara died as she crashed her ship into her former leader's vessel, but her sacrifice inspired others to similar acts of individual courage. Within hours, Sekthar's remaining forces retreated to distant sectors of the galaxy, carrying with them the old doctrine of universal purification. The war leader's final transmission echoed across space. "This contamination will spread throughout our empire. We will return when the collective consciousness has been purified of individual thought." Admiral Mordek's flagship emerged from the battle damaged but victorious. When he next communicated with the human fleet, his voice carried exhaustion and something that might have been grief for his fallen comrades. "Captain Morrison," he said, "your species has accomplished something unprecedented. You have forced an ancient empire to rediscover the value of individual choice and personal sacrifice." Morrison felt relief flood through him, though he tried to maintain professional composure. "What does this mean for humanity, Admiral?" "It means your species has earned the right to continue existing. But more than that, it means we would like to learn from you. Your chaos creates things our order cannot achieve. Perhaps cooperation between our peoples could benefit both civilizations." The formal negotiations took days to complete, but the essential agreement was simple. Humanity would establish diplomatic relations with the reformed Kethmori Empire, sharing insights about consciousness, creativity, and individual development. In exchange, the aliens would bypass human space in their ongoing purification campaigns and provide protection against external threats. It was not a perfect solution. Sekthar's faction continued to wage war against other species throughout the galaxy, justified by traditional doctrine. But it was a beginning, the first time in 2 centuries that the Kethmori had chosen preservation over elimination. Captain Morrison found himself appointed as Earth's first interstellar ambassador, a role he had never imagined when he took command of a single heavy cruiser. His mission would be to live among the aliens, helping them rediscover the individual thoughts and emotions they had abandoned in their pursuit of perfection. The final scene played out in the observation lounge of the Valiant, where Morrison stood looking at the alien fleet that had come to destroy humanity and stayed to learn from it. Chief Engineer Amy Collins joined him there, her reactor modification project abandoned now that it was no longer needed. "Captain," she said, "do you think we actually changed them, or did we just delay the inevitable?" Morrison considered the question carefully. In the distance, Kethmori ships were already departing for different sectors of the galaxy, some to continue the Great Purge under Sekthar's leadership, others to begin the difficult process of reintegrating individual consciousness into their collective society. "I think we proved that change is possible," he replied. "Even for a species that thought it had achieved perfection, Admiral Mordek and his followers are going to struggle with individual consciousness after centuries of collective thought. But they're willing to try, and that's what matters." Collins nodded, watching the alien vessels slowly move away from their defensive positions. "What about the ones who didn't change? Sekthar's faction is still out there, still eliminating species that can't defend themselves. One step at a time, Amy. We can't save everyone, but we proved that resistance has meaning even against impossible odds. Other species will hear about what happened here. Maybe some of them will find the courage to make their own stand." The conversation was interrupted by communications specialist Danny Lee. "Captain, we're receiving a message from Admiral Blake at Earth Command. The entire Sol system wants to know when you're coming home." Morrison smiled, thinking about Earth's blue skies and the families waiting for news of humanity's survival. But he also thought about the alien empire that was struggling to rediscover what it meant to choose rather than simply obey. "Tell Admiral Blake that Captain Jake Morrison W.